As you settle in, let the warmth of your blankets wrap around you like a soft cloak and allow your imagination to drift into the magical heart of Hogwarts, where stories are whispered into existence by the flickering of enchanted lanterns. Tonight, we follow the delicate threads of time, unraveling the tale of a student whose name would become a chilling echo across wizarding history. Tom Riddle, the boy who would one day be known as Lord Voldemort. But our story does not begin with darkness. No, it begins with the soft hush of rain tapping against ancient castle windows, the cool mist rolling across the forbidden forest, and the gentle glow of torches lining the winding halls of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The air is heavy with the scent of damp stone, old parchment, and the faint aroma of herbs escaping from the potions classroom. It is an evening like so many others, where students have gathered in their common rooms, their laughter and conversations blending into a comforting hum that fills the castle with life. In the heart of this timeless school, the great hall glimmers under a sky enchanted to mirror the outside world, where silver clouds drift lazily across a sea of midnight blue. Candles float overhead, their gentle flickering adding warmth to the cool night air. Plates are cleared, books are opened, and the soft scratch of quills fills the air like a gentle rain. And somewhere, tucked away within the walls of Hogwarts, a boy sits alone, a slender figure with dark hair and eyes that seem far too old for someone so young. Tom Marvolo Riddle, a name that holds no special meaning yet, sits in the Slytherin common room, his fingers tracing the edges of a book bound in faded green leather. The glow of the fireplace casts shadows that flicker across his face, softening the sharpness of his features, but unable to mask the quiet intensity in his gaze. Outside, the castle breathes. Staircases creak softly as they shift. Portraits murmur secrets to one another, and the ancient stones hum with centuries of magic woven into their foundation. It is within this world of quiet wonder and gentle enchantment that Tom's story begins, though none could have foreseen the path his footsteps would carve into history. Tonight, we will wander those halls beside him, tracing the moments where wonder turned to obsession and curiosity to hunger. We will follow the trail of quiet footsteps that led to the discovery of secrets hidden in the bones of Hogwarts itself, secrets that shaped not only a student, but the destiny of the wizarding world. So, take a deep breath, let the softness of your pillow cradle your head, and allow the story to unfold like a spell gently whispered into the night air. For every dark tale begins in the quiet, and every legend has a beginning. Within the stone walls of Hogwarts, where magic hums gently beneath every floorboard, there was once a boy who stood apart from the others, not because of his robes or his wand, but because of the silence that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Tom Marvolo Riddle was his name, though to most of his classmates he was simply Tom, a quiet, clever boy from the Slytherin house who spoke only when necessary and often disappeared into the shadows of the castle unnoticed. Tom had arrived at Hogwarts with a certain air about him, one that made students hesitate before approaching him and made professors pause when they met his gaze. There was intelligence in his eyes, a sharpness that gleamed like the edge of a polished dagger, but there was something else as well, something deeper, quieter, a hunger that simmered just beneath his calm exterior. Unlike many students who spent their evenings laughing in the common rooms, Tom preferred the solitude of the library, where ancient texts whispered to him from their shelves. He had a way of reading that made it seem as though the books spoke only to him, as though the pages unfolded secrets meant for his eyes alone. Sometimes the librarian would find him there long after curfew, the soft glow of his wand illuminating pages filled with dark enchantments and forbidden knowledge. Yet to the professors, Tom was a model student, polite, attentive, and always prepared with answers that were far too advanced for someone his age. Professor Slughorn, particularly fond of bright students, often invited Tom to his gatherings, calling him one of the most promising minds Hogwarts had seen in years. Other professors were impressed by his grasp of complex spells, his natural talent for potions, and his ability to speak so persuasively, it was almost as if the words themselves carried magic. But to those who paid attention, there were small signs, things easily dismissed if you didn't know where to look. The way Tom's smile never quite reached his eyes. The way animals in his presence seemed unnerved, as if sensing something unspoken. The way he listened more than he spoke, absorbing every detail like a sponge drawing in water. And then there was his curiosity, an insatiable desire to know everything, especially about the secrets hidden within Hogwarts itself. Despite the distance he kept from others, there were a few students who dared to call him a friend. A boy named Avery, always eager to bask in Tom's brilliance. A quiet girl named Rosier, who admired his confidence. They were drawn to him, enchanted by the way he made the impossible seem within reach. Yet even they never truly knew him, for Tom was careful to reveal only the parts of himself that served his purpose. In the heart of the castle, beneath the soft glow of candlelight, Tom Riddle walked a path only he could see, a path toward knowledge, power, and a destiny that had not yet been written. A boy with secrets in his heart and shadows at his heels. It was a cold autumn evening when the first whisper reached Tom Riddle's ears, a whisper that seemed to emerge not from the air around him, but from the very stones beneath his feet. He was returning from the library, the sleeves of his robes lightly dusted with parchment fibers from hours spent thumbing through brittle pages. The halls were empty, his footsteps echoing softly, but the whisper followed him, a faint, serpentine hiss curling through the corridor like a living breath. He paused, heart beating just a touch faster than usual. His dark eyes narrowed as they swept over the corridor, the flickering torchlight stretching his shadow long across the stone. There was no one there, no door creaked open, no portrait stirred to life. And yet, the whisper came again. Come closer. It was not in English, nor Latin, nor any tongue taught within Hogwarts' walls. It was something else, something older. And to Tom's own surprise, he understood it. Not only understood it, but felt it coil around his mind like a serpent around a branch, urging him forward. Parseltongue, it was a gift, or perhaps a curse, and in that moment, it awoke within him like a long-forgotten memory surfacing after years submerged in silence. The whisper led him down corridors he knew, and then into passages he didn't. Walls shifted, torches dimmed, and portraits whose eyes should have been watchful stood curiously still. The castle itself seemed to recognize him, welcoming him deeper into its belly. He descended narrow staircases, passed through hidden archways, and found himself standing before a small alcove, tucked into the lower levels near the dungeons. A place where most students never ventured, where the air was heavy with dampness and the scent of earth. Set into the wall was a serpent, carved from ancient stone. Its eyes glimmered faintly, not from any spell, but as though the very stone was alive. Tom lifted his hand and, without quite understanding why, spoke to it, not in English, but in parcel tongue. His voice slid smoothly between the syllables, words hissing softly through the air. The serpent's mouth opened, revealing a narrow passageway, just wide enough for him to step through. The air inside was colder, ancient, untouched for countless years. It was not a grand chamber or a hidden library. It was something far simpler. A small, circular room with walls of slick black stone. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it rested a single object, a small, leather-bound journal. Its cover bore no title, no crest, only a symbol etched into the corner, the faint, curling mark of a snake. Tom's fingers had hovered above it for a moment, before finally resting on its cover. The leather was ice cold, but the moment he touched it, something stirred within him, a pulse, a memory that was not his own, but felt like it belonged there all along. The journal recognized him. It knew his blood, his lineage, and his purpose. Without hesitation, Tom opened the book. The pages were blank, but not truly blank. Ink bled faintly through the parchment, like words written long ago and scrubbed away, leaving only ghosts behind. He traced a finger down the first page, and as he did, the ink began to reform, swirling and reshaping into sentences. The handwriting was elegant, but sharp-edged, each letter formed with precision and intent. To the one who seeks to know more than the rest, to the heir whose blood carries the weight of secrets untold. Tom's breath stilled in his throat. This was no ordinary journal. This was a message written to him before he had even set foot in the castle, waiting patiently through years of silence until the right hand had opened it. He turned the next page and the next. Each one unveiled a fragment of a story, of Salazar Slytherin himself, of secrets buried within Hogwarts' very walls, and of the true purpose behind the house that bore his name. It was not merely ambition or cunning that had driven Salazar. It was fear, fear that magic itself would weaken if left to those without the right blood. Tom felt a strange kinship with the words, as if the ancient founder understood him in a way no professor ever had. There was talk of a hidden chamber, of a beast lying dormant, of spells long since forbidden. The journal promised power to the one who could unlock these secrets, power tied to Hogwarts itself, to the stones beneath Tom's feet. For weeks after, the journal became Tom's obsession. He carried it beneath his robes, reading it by wandlight late into the night. It spoke to him in parcel tongue when no one was near, its whispered words filling the dormitory like a second heartbeat. It revealed passages in the castle that no map had ever shown, led him to doors that opened only at his command. And through it all, the castle responded as if awakening to the presence of an heir who had finally come to claim his birthright. One evening, the journal led him to an ancient door deep beneath the castle, locked not with magic, but with language. Tom placed his hand upon it and whispered the words it taught him. The door groaned open, revealing a chamber that had not been touched in centuries. Its walls were lined with shelves, and upon them rested artifacts no student had ever seen, artifacts belonging not to the founders, but to students who had come before him, students drawn to the same dark knowledge. There were old wands, cracked and splintered, enchanted quills that wrote messages on their own, vials of shimmering liquid labeled only with names, names of students who had disappeared long ago, and in the center of it all, beneath a thick glass dome, lay a vial filled with ink so dark it seemed to swallow the light around it. The journal whispered its name, blood ink. It was said to be ink that could bind memory to page, allowing a wizard to write not only words, but pieces of their very soul into a book. Tom's fingers trembled as he lifted the vial. With this, he could create something no wizard had dared to create, a piece of himself that could never die. A whisper in his own voice, trapped forever in parchment and ink. But the journal warned him, such magic came at a cost. It required not only blood, but intent, an understanding that what he wrote would bind him to the pages in ways even death could not sever. Tom did not hesitate. For the first time in his life, he felt that he had discovered something truly his own, not a lesson from a professor, not a charm from a textbook, but ancient, forbidden power hidden within the bones of Hogwarts itself. He pricked his finger with the tip of his wand, watching as a single drop of blood fell into the ink. It shimmered, turned silver, then black, and with the first stroke of his quill, Tom Riddle began writing himself into history, not as a boy, not as a student, but as something far more enduring, something that could never die. And somewhere deep beneath the castle, the walls whispered back. The days passed in a strange kind of haze after Tom Riddle discovered the journal's secrets. Hogwarts felt both more alive and more silent than ever, as if the castle itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what Tom would do next. The journal rarely lay dormant now. Its pages flickered with new words almost daily, revealing fragments of ancient knowledge, the likes of which Tom had never seen in any textbook. Yet there was one section of the journal that refused to open for him. No matter how many times he whispered in parcel tongue or traced the delicate edges of the leather binding with his wand, the pages near the very middle remained stubbornly sealed. The ink curled into spirals of text he could not read, symbols older than even Hogwarts itself, written in a language that felt half-formed, as if the words themselves shifted the longer he stared at them. One evening, long after curfew, Tom sat alone in the Slytherin common room, the greenish glow of the lake filtering through the windows, casting shadowed ripples across the stone floor. The fire had burned low, crackling faintly in the silence, and the journal lay open before him. His frustration was growing. He was certain that within those pages lay something far more powerful than anything he had yet unlocked. Then, as if answering his unspoken demand, the castle itself seemed to stir. A vibration, almost imperceptible, ran through the floor beneath his chair. The flames flickered higher, casting strange shapes upon the wall, not random bursts of firelight, but symbols that matched the forbidden script within the journal. Tom stood slowly, his heart pounding softly in his chest. The castle was speaking to him again, but this time it was not just leading him through hidden doors or forgotten corridors. This was something deeper, a direct connection between Hogwarts and the magic bound within the journal. With the journal in hand, Tom followed the subtle pull. Through the corridors he walked, his footsteps the only sound, passing tapestries that whispered faintly as he passed. The castle led him higher, up staircases that moved with unusual precision, each one aligning perfectly to form a direct path. He arrived at a door he had never seen before, far above the dungeons, tucked into a shadowed alcove near the astronomy tower. It was plain, unmarked, but cold to the touch. When Tom pressed his palm to the wood, the journal's sealed pages began to glow faintly, as if whatever lay behind the door was directly tied to the magic locked within the book. The door creaked open, revealing a room bathed in silver blue light. It was circular, much like the room where he had found the journal, but this chamber was alive with magic. Wisps of light hung in the air like mist, and the walls were covered in the same ancient symbols he had seen in the journal. In the center of the room stood a pedestal carved from obsidian, and resting upon it was a mirror. Its frame was etched with serpents coiling around each other, their eyes glinting green. This was no ordinary mirror. Its surface did not reflect the room, but rather showed an endless tunnel of scenes, flickering moments from Hogwarts' long history, as if the mirror itself remembered every secret ever whispered within these walls. Tom stepped closer, and the journal in his hand vibrated with energy, its sealed pages fluttering open at last. New words spilled across the parchment, not a memory this time, but a set of instructions. This was a ritual, older than even Salazar Slytherin himself, designed to bind a piece of one's soul to an object, to make oneself truly immortal. It was not Horcrux magic, not yet. That word would come later. But this was the seed, the earliest version of the spell, a forgotten piece of magic so dangerous that it had been deliberately erased from the Hogwarts curriculum centuries ago. The journal had preserved it, waiting for the right heir to unlock it. Tom traced the instructions with trembling fingers, feeling the truth of the spell sinking into his bones. It was elegant in its simplicity, a binding ritual that required only intent, sacrifice, and a willing object to house the fragment of one's soul. The mirror, the journal explained, had been used once before by a student whose name history had long since forgotten, a student who had disappeared, leaving only this room behind. The journal described the process in exquisite detail, The incantation, the precise movements of the wand, the offering of something deeply personal, a memory, a secret, a moment of pure ambition. And once the ritual was complete, the mirror would no longer show the past. It would show only one thing: the future desired by the one who performed the spell. Tom's pulse raced. This was it. This was what he had been searching for. Not just power, but permanence. The ability to carve his own future into the fabric of magic itself, to ensure his note would never be forgotten. With the journal open before him, Tom spoke the incantation softly, his voice a thread of sound woven into the still air. The mirror's surface rippled, turning dark as shadow, and the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and old stone. He closed his eyes and offered his memory, not a happy one, not a treasured one, but a memory of the first time he realized the world saw him as unwanted, as less than. The orphanage, the whispered words of the matron, the sense of being something other. The mirror drank the memory in silence, and when Tom opened his eyes, the surface had changed. It no longer reflected him at all. Instead, it showed a figure, tall, robed in darkness, standing not at Hogwarts, but above it, looking down upon the castle as though it belonged to him. The figure raised his wand, and the sky darkened at his command. Tom stared at the image, and the journal whispered one final word: Voldemort. The name formed like smoke on the glass, curling an elegant script before dissolving into mist. This was not just a glimpse of the future. It was a promise. The spell had taken hold, binding not just a piece of Tom's soul, but his very identity to this vision. From this moment forward, the boy known as Tom Riddle would walk two paths, one in the present and one in the future he had now set in motion. The mirror dimmed, returning to its original silver sheen, but Tom knew the change could not be undone. The castle, the journal, the very walls around him, they all knew his true name now. And somewhere deep within Hogwarts, the ancient foundations shifted, acknowledging the rise of something it had never seen before, a Dark Lord born not from war, but from the whispered secrets of its own stones. Tom closed the journal, the weight of his new name settling over him like a cloak. He turned from the mirror, stepping back into the darkened corridor, and the door sealed itself behind him. The castle would keep its secrets a little while longer, but not forever. The days following the ritual passed like a dream for Tom Riddle, though it was a dream only he knew was real. To the rest of Hogwarts, he was the same quiet, brilliant student, polite when required, respectful to professors, and just aloof enough to keep most of his classmates at a distance. But beneath that carefully maintained mask, something was shifting. It was subtle at first, a kind of knowing confidence in his gaze, a touch of command in his voice when he spoke, even to students older than himself. The mirror's vision had settled deep into his mind, like a seed planted in rich soil, and already Tom was beginning to think not as a boy, but as the shadowed figure the mirror had shown him. Voldemort. The name was a whisper now, not yet spoken aloud, but present in every thought. The journal had offered no more words since the ritual. Its pages were silent, as if the ancient magic within it knew its work was done, at least for now. But Hogwarts itself had grown more alive to Tom's senses. The castle no longer felt like a school. It felt like a creature, breathing softly around him, walls filled with memories and whispers that only he could hear. It was during one of his solitary late-night walks, those hours when the castle belonged only to shadows and secrets, that Tom first noticed the difference. The torches along the walls seemed to brighten as he passed, their flames bending slightly toward him, as though they recognized him now. The portraits, too, responded differently. Some looked away quickly, others stared after him long after he had passed, their painted eyes filled with something between curiosity and fear. Tom welcomed the change. Power, after all, was meant to be felt, even if only by those sensitive enough to notice. Yet even with this quiet recognition from the castle itself, he knew there was more to uncover. The ritual had opened a door, but not all the way. The mirror had shown him his future, but it had also hinted at something else, something the castle was still hiding, waiting for him to claim. And so Tom began to search, not frantically, but methodically. Each night, after the common room had fallen silent and his classmates drifted into sleep, he would slip through the corridors, tracing his fingers along the cold stone, pausing at each tapestry and suit of armor, listening. The castle spoke to him in fragments, not words, but sensations. A faint vibration beneath his palm, a cool breeze from a corridor that should have been sealed, a sudden flicker of torchlight when no wind stirred the air. Slowly, he began to map these signs, marking places where the castle's magic felt thicker, like ancient knots waiting to be untied. One night, the trail led him deeper than he had ever gone, down a narrow staircase hidden behind a tapestry of Salazar Slytherin. The air grew colder with each step, the damp scent of earth and ancient stone rising around him. When he reached the bottom, he found himself standing before a door that seemed to hum faintly with its own quiet life. It was covered in carvings, serpents coiled around each other, their eyes set with tiny emeralds that glinted even in the darkness. Tom knew, without needing to be told, that this door had been waiting for him. He raised his hand to the wood, and the carvings shifted beneath his fingers, rearranging themselves into a familiar script. Parseltongue, the message was clear. Only the heir may enter. Tom whispered the command, his voice sliding into the serpentine language with ease. The door creaked open, revealing a passageway that sloped even further downward into darkness so thick it seemed almost alive. The walls were lined with torches that flared to life as he passed, casting flickering light over carvings that grew more ancient the deeper he went. He walked for what felt like hours, the silence broken only by his footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. Yet despite the oppressive darkness, Tom felt no fear. This place belonged to him, even if no one else knew it yet. At last, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, larger than the great hall, its ceiling lost in shadows. In the center stood a raised platform, and upon it rested a book, bound in deep green leather, its cover marked only by a single serpent curling into the shape of the letter S. Tom approached slowly, reverently. The air around the book shimmered faintly, as though it existed slightly outside the present moment, caught between memory and reality. He reached out, fingers brushing the cover, and felt a pulse of magic respond to his touch. The book opened on its own, its pages filled with cramped, spidery handwriting that seemed to crawl across the parchment. These were spells unlike any Tom had seen before, spells meant not just to command magic, but to command will itself. Spells that could twist truth into lies, or lies into truth. Spells that could bind a soul or fracture it beyond repair. This was no ordinary spellbook. It was a record, the personal grimoire of Salazar Slytherin himself, passed down through the centuries, waiting for the heir who would understand its power. Tom read for hours, his mind drinking in the forbidden knowledge like a man starved. Some spells were too complex even for him to attempt, yet. Others, simpler in design but devastating in effect, he committed to memory immediately. Each page built upon the last, forming not just a list of incantations, but a philosophy, a vision of power rooted not in strength alone, but in control. The castle's whispers grew louder the longer he read, until they seemed to merge with the words on the page, as though Hogwarts itself was teaching him, shaping him into the future the mirror had promised. At last, when the first pale light of dawn began to seep through cracks in the stone, Tom closed the book. He had learned enough for now. The rest would wait, because power, he understood, was not just about knowledge, it was about patience. He returned to the dormitory before anyone could notice his absence, the weight of the grimoire heavy in his mind, even though he had left it behind. Its words were burned into his memory, and as he lay in bed, staring at the canopy above him, he knew that his path was set. Voldemort was no longer just a name in a mirror. It was a destiny, carved into the very foundations of Hogwarts itself. And now, the castle was no longer just a school. It was his ally, his teacher, and soon it would become his kingdom. Tom Riddle closed his eyes, and as sleep claimed him, the castle's whispers settled into silence once more, but this time it was a silence filled not with peace, but with anticipation. The next evening, after lessons had ended, and the corridors were alive with the soft hum of student chatter, Tom Riddle slipped away. His classmates were used to his quiet disappearances by now, accustomed to the way he would vanish into the folds of Hogwarts, only to reappear hours later with no explanation. He moved with quiet purpose, the castle's ever-shifting corridors parting for him in ways that would have confused most students. But for Tom, Hogwarts itself had become familiar, almost alive in its guidance. The walls seemed to pulse softly, gently urging him forward, leading him to a place that had long been forgotten by most who walked these halls. The whispers in the stone had grown clearer since the night he found the spellbook. They led him past the usual routes, down twisting staircases that didn't always exist, through narrow corridors barely wide enough for him to pass. The castle was offering him secrets, and Tom was more than willing to accept them. He found himself outside a door he had never seen before, tucked between two statues near the lower levels of the dungeons. It wasn't the Chamber of Secrets that lay even deeper, hidden for centuries. This door was simpler, but no less ancient, its wood worn smooth with time. Tom placed his hand on the handle, and the door swung open without a sound, as though it had been waiting for him. The room beyond was circular, its walls lined with shelves upon shelves of books, scrolls, and trinkets coated in years of dust. A single lantern flickered to life as he stepped inside, casting a warm golden glow over the room. This was a place of memory, a vault of sorts, where remnants of long-gone students and forgotten professors lay waiting. Tom walked slowly, fingers tracing the spines of ancient tomes, pausing here and there to read the titles. Most were in Latin, some in languages he didn't recognize. A few bore the marks of famous magical families, the Blacks, the Malfoys, and others whose names carried weight even among pure-blood circles. It was not the books themselves that drew Tom in, but the fragments of history left behind by those who had once sought the same power he now pursued. There were notes scrawled in the margins, diagrams of spells half-formed and abandoned, letters between students that hinted at secret societies and forbidden practices long buried under the weight of time. One parchment, its edges curled and browned with age, caught his eye. It was a map, not of Hogwarts itself, but of a hidden network beneath the dungeons, a web of passages and rooms even the marauders would never have found. At its center was a single mark, the Sanctum of Salazar. The name thrummed through Tom like a spark catching dry wood. He knew without question that this was what the castle had been leading him toward. Salazar Slytherin's true legacy was not just the chamber, it was this hidden sanctum where knowledge far older and darker than the school itself had been locked away. Armed with the map, Tom retraced his steps, moving deeper into the dungeons until the very air seemed to change around him. The warmth of the castle above gave way to a bone-deep chill, the kind that settled into the skin and whispered of long-forgotten things. The stone walls were damp here, glistening with moisture that shimmered faintly in the light of his wand. The corridor split into 3 paths, and Tom hesitated only briefly before choosing the leftmost one. The map seemed to glow faintly in his hand, as though confirming his choice, and he followed it with careful, deliberate steps. The first door he found was locked, not with a simple charm, but with something older, a ward that resisted even his most practiced unlocking spells. He could feel the pulse of ancient magic within it, something that would require more than cleverness to break. Tom smiled to himself. A challenge. He placed both hands on the door and closed his eyes, reaching out not with magic alone, but with will. He spoke to the door the way he might speak to a snake, his voice low and coaxing, offering not commands, but persuasion. The door responded, its magic flickering uncertainly, as though torn between duty and desire. When it finally opened, it was not with a creak or a groan, but a soft sigh, as though the room itself was relieved to be found again. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old parchment and dried herbs. The shelves were lined with bottles and vials, many clouded with age, their labels long faded. In the center of the room was a single pedestal, upon which rested a silver ring engraved with serpentine runes. Tom knew better than to touch it immediately. Instead, he circled the pedestal, studying the runes, deciphering their meaning with the careful patience of a scholar uncovering lost knowledge. They spoke of protection, not for the wearer, but for the secrets bound within the ring itself. It was a key, of sorts, not to a door, but to memory. Whoever wore it would be granted glimpses of Salazar's own thoughts, the fragments of his mind left behind when he built Hogwarts. It was a dangerous gift, but one Tom knew he could not leave behind. He slipped the ring onto his finger, and the room seemed to shift around him, the air shimmering like heat rising from stone. The shelves faded, replaced by visions, flashes of Salazar himself, standing where Tom now stood, speaking words long forgotten, weaving spells too ancient for modern wizards to fully understand. Tom stood still, letting the visions wash over him, absorbing every word, every gesture, every whispered secret. When the visions faded, he felt as though a piece of Salazar himself had settled into his mind, like a whisper that would never quite leave him. The door closed behind him as he left, sealing itself once more, but Tom knew he would always be able to return. The castle would remember him now, not as a student, but as an heir who had begun to claim what was his by birthright. As he walked back toward the dormitory, the ring cold against his skin, Tom felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. The mirror's prophecy, the spellbook's secrets, the castle's whispered guidance, all of it had led to this moment, this choice. He could turn back, forget the secrets he had uncovered, live out his days as a brilliant but ordinary student. Or he could follow the path the castle had laid before him, a path that led not to safety, but to power. For Tom Riddle, the choice had never really been a choice at all. He stepped into the common room, the firelight flickering against his pale skin, and for the first time in his life, he allowed himself a smile, not the polite, practiced smile of a prefect, but a smile filled with quiet, certain triumph. The future had begun, and it belonged to him. The ancient corridors of Hogwarts held their breath as Tom Riddle descended once more into the lower depths of the castle, the weight of the silver ring pressing against his finger. The ring felt colder than before, as though the magic sealed within had awakened. The whispers of Salazar Slytherin still drifted faintly in his mind, not words exactly, but fleeting impressions, fragments of thought left behind like ink stains on old parchment. The map he had discovered guided him now to a place even the professors likely had no knowledge of, a chamber within a chamber, hidden beneath the very foundation of the Slytherin dormitories. It required not only knowledge to enter, but intent. Salazar's magic would only yield to one who sought power with unwavering purpose. Tom stood before the concealed doorway, tracing the edges of the stone arch with his fingertips. The ring pulsed gently, and the door responded, shimmering into view as though called from the stone itself. It was ancient and smooth, covered in serpentine runes that seemed to slither across the surface, rearranging themselves into words Tom could understand. Only the air shall pass. There was no need for a spoken spell. Tom pressed his palm flat against the door, letting his own magic flow into the ancient wood and stone. The door swung inward, silent and obedient, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into shadow. Each step he took was accompanied by a soft echo, the sound trailing behind him like a ghost. The air grew colder, heavier, scented faintly with something metallic, perhaps ancient potions spilled long ago, or the lingering presence of spells left to rot in silence. The walls pulsed with ancient wards, layers of enchantments piled atop each other like sedimentary rock, each one a record of the countless generations who had sought this place and failed to find it. At the bottom of the staircase, the passage opened into a circular chamber far larger than Tom had expected. The floor was made of polished obsidian, reflecting his flickering lantern like a dark mirror. In the center stood a raised platform, and upon it rested an object both beautiful and terrible, a book bound in smooth black leather, its cover marked with a silver serpent curling around a dagger. Tom knew, even before he touched it, that this was no ordinary spellbook. It was Salazar Slytherin's private grimoire, a collection of spells, enchantments, and curses too dangerous for even the founders to openly teach. The book radiated power, its very presence bending the air around it. But it was not the book alone that held his attention. Surrounding the platform were 7 tall mirrors, their frames wrought from dark iron, their surfaces swirling not with reflections, but with images, glimpses of the past, moments drawn from Salazar's own life. As Tom stepped closer, the mirrors responded, glowing faintly and playing out scenes like memories made visible. He saw Salazar himself, not the stern, cold figure history painted, but a younger man, passionate and ambitious, his eyes burning with belief in his vision for Hogwarts. He saw Salazar crafting the Chamber of Secrets, not as a weapon, but as a safeguard, a sanctuary where knowledge too dangerous for the world above could be preserved. Another mirror showed the rift between Salazar and Godric Gryffindor, not a clash of tempers, but a slow erosion of trust, each refusing to yield until the friendship fractured beyond repair. Tom saw the pain in Salazar's eyes as he sealed the chamber, not out of malice, but out of fear that his legacy would be destroyed. In the next mirror, Tom saw something that made his breath catch. The image of a boy, dark-haired and pale, standing in the same chamber where Tom now stood. The boy wore ancient robes, the green of Slytherin deep and regal, and on his finger was the very ring Tom now wore. It was not Salazar, but one of his heirs, a boy who had stood in this very spot centuries before, seeking the same power. But something had gone wrong. The mirror showed the boy faltering, his spell unraveling, the chamber turning against him. Tom watched as the ancient magic consumed the boy, leaving nothing but the ring behind. The warning was clear. Power came at a price. But Tom was not afraid. He was cleverer, more determined. He would succeed where others had failed. With deliberate care, Tom reached for the book, his fingertips brushing the worn leather cover. The magic within surged to meet him, testing him, tasting his intent. The book's enchantment was not designed to keep intruders out, but to measure them, to see if they were worthy of what lay within. Tom spoke a single word, legilimens. It was not the spell the book expected, but it worked all the same. The book opened itself to him, its pages flicking rapidly until they settled on a single spell, one Salazar had never dared to teach, even in secret. It was a spell of division, a way to fracture the soul itself, to tether fragments of life to objects, anchoring them so deeply into the physical world that death could not touch them. It was the earliest form of the Horcrux spell, though not by that name. Tom's heart raced, but his hands were steady. This was not fear. This was exhilaration, the pure and terrible joy of discovery. He understood now why the castle had guided him here, why the spellbook had whispered to him, why the ring had chosen him. This was his inheritance, his destiny. The spell was incomplete, a dangerous, half-formed theory left behind when Salazar himself recoiled from what it required, the deliberate taking of a life, the shattering of one's own soul. But Tom saw no fear in it. To him, it was beautiful, the ultimate expression of control, of bending life and death itself to one's will. He stood in the center of the chamber, the spellbook open before him, the mirrors flickering with images of those who had come before and failed. He would not fail. This magic belonged to him now, not as a student or a seeker, but as heir and master. As he closed the book, the chamber's magic dimmed, the mirrors returning to dark glass. The room had given up its secrets, and in doing so, sealed Tom's fate. There was no turning back now. The path he had chosen led only forward, into darkness, into power, into legend. He ascended the staircase slowly, the spellbook hidden beneath his cloak, the ring gleaming faintly on his hand. The air seemed heavier, the castle itself holding its breath. Tom Riddle had found the knowledge he sought, and in doing so, taken the first step toward becoming something far more terrible than the boy who had entered. He did not smile, not this time. This was not a moment for celebration. This was a coronation, silent and unseen, but no less real. The Dark Lord was not born in a moment of rage, nor in the heat of battle. He was born in silence, in a hidden chamber beneath the castle, with only the whispering walls to bear witness. And Hogwarts, ancient and wise, knew it had played its part in shaping him. The heavy door to the secret chamber creaked softly shut behind Tom Riddle, sealing away the ancient secrets once more. The air in the corridor felt different now, thicker, quieter, as though the very stones understood the weight of what had transpired within. The walls of Hogwarts had witnessed countless secrets over the centuries, but this one, perhaps, would become one of its darkest. Tom walked slowly back toward the familiar halls of the castle above, his fingers brushing lightly against the cool, aged stone as if grounding himself after what had just unfolded. The ancient book of spells lay hidden beneath his cloak, its edges pressing faintly against his ribs with every step, a silent reminder that the knowledge he carried was no longer a myth or legend. It was real, and it was his. Outside the chamber, the castle seemed unchanged. The same golden lanterns flickered softly along the corridors, the faint scent of wax and parchment drifting through the air. A low murmur of distant conversations floated up from the great hall where a late evening meal was being served. The castle itself had settled into the kind of calm that only came with winter evenings, the hush before snowfall, the gentle stillness of students curled up in common rooms, the quiet rustle of owls delivering last letters before bed. And yet, within Tom, nothing felt the same. He paused at the edge of the corridor, just beyond the reach of candlelight, and looked toward the great hall. Inside, students laughed softly over bowls of warm stew, their scarves draped loosely around their necks, house colors blending together in the flickering firelight. Friends leaned close, sharing stories, harmless secrets, and plans for the holidays ahead. It was a world Tom had never truly belonged to. He had walked among them, yes, but he had always stood apart, watching, calculating, learning. Tonight, that separation felt sharper than ever before. What he carried now, the knowledge, the power, was a weight no one else could understand. Not the professors, not the headmaster, not even his fellow Slytherins. Yet even in that solitude, there was a certain sense of peace. Tom had always craved answers, control, understanding. Tonight, he had claimed all three. There was no fear left in him now, no uncertainty. The path ahead was clear, and he would walk it alone. Still, there was comfort in the familiar rituals of the castle. He slipped into the Slytherin common room, where the fire crackled low and green flames flickered against dark stone walls. A few students lounged in armchairs, dozing or reading quietly. Tom moved past them like a shadow, unnoticed, his presence blending into the room like mist curling along the floor. He sat by the window, the chilled glass fogging beneath his breath, and looked out across the dark grounds of Hogwarts. The forbidden forest stood in the distance, a sea of black trees trembling under a sky heavy with stars. The castle itself seemed to breathe with the night, ancient magic seeping through its walls, old spells woven into every stone and beam. Hogwarts had always been a place of learning, of shelter, but for Tom, it had also been a place of revelation. The book rested on his lap now, its leather warm beneath his fingers. For a moment, he did nothing but sit there, listening to the crackling fire, the occasional soft snore of a sleeping student, the hush of the castle settling for the night. This was the calm after the storm, the silence that followed discovery, the stillness before choices set fate in motion. In the days to come, Tom knew he would return to this room again and again, always hiding his treasure, always protecting the secrets it held. But for now, he allowed himself this quiet moment, breathing in the ancient air of Hogwarts, feeling the steady pulse of the castle beneath him like a living thing. This was no longer just the end of one night's search. It was the beginning of something much greater, a path that would stretch far beyond these walls, into shadows, into fear, into legend. For now, however, Hogwarts was at peace. Its fires burned softly. Its students dreamed simple dreams. Its corridors hummed gently with ancient enchantments. And in the heart of it all, one boy sat quietly by the window, a book in his lap, and a future dark and boundless unspooling before him like mist over the forbidden forest. The night had grown deep, and the castle slept in peaceful silence, unaware of the secrets quietly unfolding within its ancient walls. The gentle glow of the common room fire cast flickering patterns across the floor, wrapping the stone chamber in a warm embrace. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly over the grounds of Hogwarts, their soft light glinting off the black lake like scattered diamonds resting on dark silk. Tom Riddle sat motionless by the window, his silhouette framed by that same quiet starlight, the ancient book of spells resting on the table beside him. His fingers gently traced its cover, but his thoughts wandered far beyond the pages. For all the power he had uncovered, and all the knowledge that now belonged to him, there was still a curious sense of calm, the kind that comes not from certainty, but from knowing that there are still stories left to discover. The castle, ancient and wise, had seen many students pass through its halls. Some had come searching for belonging, others for friendship, and a few, like Tom, had come searching for answers only the shadows could provide. And yet, Hogwarts remained what it had always been, a home to those who sought its comfort, a keeper of secrets for those brave enough to ask. Even now, as Tom drifted deeper into thought, the castle itself seemed to hum with quiet reassurance, as though whispering that it had seen darkness before, and it would see it again, but its walls would endure, its magic would remain, and its stories would be told long after one boy's footsteps faded from its halls. There was a strange comfort in that, even for someone like Tom Riddle. The idea that the world was vast enough to hold both light and shadow, both warmth and fear, that the gentle flicker of lanterns would always push back against the dark, and that even the darkest nights would eventually give way to dawn. And so, as the fire dimmed and the stars shifted overhead, the castle settled once more into its quiet rhythm. In the common room, in the towers, in the dormitories, dreams drifted softly through the air, some filled with wonder, some with mystery, and some with the quiet hope of better tomorrows. And though the path ahead for Tom Riddle would lead far from the warmth of this night, for now, Hogwarts held him gently, wrapped in ancient stone and starlight, a part of its story, if only for a little while longer.